We've got a Fox News alert. Donald Trump's Muslim travel ban is blocked, so-called, at least for now. A federal judge in Seattle ordered a temporary restraining order against the executive order blocking arrivals from 7 countries. The ruling means that for now, the order cannot be enforced. Fox News correspondent Dan Springer is live with more on the judge's decision. Dan, what do you know?
Yeah, and Tucker, this is important because this is a nationwide enforcement, or basically an effort to block this enforcement of this Trump executive order across the country. We've seen other challenges, but they are more narrowly tailored. This one is across the country. Judge James Robart giving the Attorney General here in Washington State a full victory by issuing this temporary restraining order, arguing and citing that the state does have standing. The state is being harmed by this executive order on immigration, and that it is likely the state would win on the merits of the case. Here is the Attorney General from Washington, Bob Ferguson, reacting after the decision today.
Judge Robart's decision, effective immediately, effective now, it's a halt to President Trump's unconstitutional and unlawful executive order. The law is a powerful thing. It has the ability to hold everybody accountable to it, and that includes the President of the United States.
So Bob Ferguson says that stops the ban on the refugee program. It stops the 90-day ban on people coming in from Iran, Iraq, from Libya. And so we don't know what the Trump administration is going to do. Donald Trump did tweet today earlier that, to quote, "We must keep evil out of our country." But that was in response to a victory that he had in a court in Massachusetts. The Department of Homeland Security issued a no comment today, but certainly it's likely the Trump administration will file an appeal to try to block this temporary restraining order. Tucker?
Dan Springer, thanks a lot. Well, despite today's ruling, lawsuits keep piling up against the immigration orders. Today, the ACLU filed a class action lawsuit in the state of California. They claim the order is religious discrimination and does not provide constitutional due process to foreign arrivals. We're joined now by Michael Breen, a co-founder of the International Refugee Assistance Project, a party in the ACLU's new lawsuit. Michael Breen, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So the obvious question, just reading from the script,
sure.
The ACLU is saying that it's unconstitutional because it doesn't provide due process to foreigners coming to this country. I don't know if you're a lawyer or not, but you are? Okay, yep. So are foreign nationals due process under our Constitution?
Well, once they're on U.S. soil, they have rights. I mean, that's a key piece of law.
Yes, yes.
But more importantly, I mean, let's talk about how this case started. I mean, our two first clients, 2 Iraqis, both risked their lives working for the United States in Iraq. Right. They were special immigrant visa holders. That's the program for Iraqis who are targeted by terrorist organizations because they worked with the United States.
Yes.
So they were vetted. The U.S. government made a determination that, 1, their lives were at risk from terrorists because they stood with us. Guys like me, I fought in Iraq, right? So they worked with people like me. And 2, that they went through about a 2-year vetting process and they weren't determined to be security threats. They got on airplanes to come to the U.S. with valid travel documents. They landed and were detained. One guy was placed in handcuffs when he got to this country.
Yep.
We found out about this, and we contacted a large number of lawyers when we started to find out these cases were happening, started to go to airports. I was out at Dulles International. These 2 guys came into JFK. And we had some simple questions like, hey, can we see our clients? What's the law here? And I got to tell you, my heart goes out to the cops and the Customs and Border Patrol guys who are trying to implement this order, because the way the White House did this, they had no real guidance, so they didn't know. We couldn't find out what happened to these people, and so we filed a writ of habeas corpus, which is basically a fundamental right, says if the government's detain you, we want to come see you and find out who you are.
See, that's the thing. Look, nothing you say surprises me. I've been detained by foreign governments twice.
Yeah, me too.
And the bureaucracy is not something you want to get involved with in any country. And I feel for the people you just described, and we could carve out exemptions for them, as we did for the Montagnards after Vietnam.
Well, I think
but the larger question and the basis of your lawsuit is a meaningful one, which is that foreign nationals, who, by the way, are not on U.S. soil, I mean, these are people, your lawsuit seeks to overturn a ban on people who are not yet here. So your lawsuit suggests that people in other countries have a right to our constitutional protection. So does that mean that North Korea could sue us for anti-Korean discrimination? No, I'm serious.
No, of course not.
Because what's the difference? Why would a foreigner in a foreign country have a right to due process under our Constitution?
Because these people are involved in a legal process that the United States government is interacting with them on that process, right? Once they start to interact with the U.S. government, certain rights attach, and definitely when they get here. So you're talking about, and again, this is a difficult question to answer in part, because we're talking about a broad category of people. I mean, this may or may not, depending on who you listen to and which website you read from the government right now, apply to green card holders. This may or may not apply to visa
Well,
holders.
they're saying it does not apply to green card holders.
Well,
but you're right, that wasn't clear at
if you check the
first.
Customs and Border Patrol
I'm
website
aware.
right now, it says something different.
Look, and there's no defending the chaos around it, but again, the basic principles are worth sorting out because this is not going to end now. It's going to continue, and we need to figure out how we view this. So
that's right.
You're making the case that we need to let in these refugees, not just to repay them for helping us, which I think is a valid argument, but for national security reasons. So why would it help us from a national security perspective to let in refugees from these 7 countries?
Well, let's be clear. We're not just talking about refugees, but the thing is, we're in a fight. And what this executive order
We're
does...
not just talking about refugees,
right.
but people
this
who want to come
executive order bans everybody who wants to come here from 7 different countries.
Right.
15,000 Iraqi soldiers and Peshmerga fighters have given their lives fighting ISIS, the Islamic State. President Trump's #1 national security priority is to defeat the Islamic State. I agree with that, right? The people who are right now, while you and I are talking, doing the house-to-house, nose-to-nose, kill-or-die fight against the Islamic State on the ground in places like Mosul. If you've ever been in an urban gunfight, that's no joke, right? These guys are the ones who are taking the fight to ISIL.
Right.
We just told them and their families, they're not welcome in the United States. General Petraeus testified before the House Armed Services
For a
Committee
short period of time.
No, not at all for a short period of
I
time.
mean, it's a temporary order.
I mean, okay, until we sort this whole thing out? I mean, is there...
No, isn't it by definition a temporary order, unless I'm misreading it?
Yeah, but he's got the executive power to do what he wants after this.
Okay, but...
And let's talk about the immediate consequences, right? General Al-Qatani is the commander...
But that's one of 7 countries, and I understand your point.
We're talking about Syria, too.
We're also talking about Yemen and Somalia and Iran and countries that we are not directly involved in. And so,
but it's a random list of countries. Let's talk about that.
It's not random. It's a list.
Random. I mean,
no, it's the list of countries that the Obama administration deemed dangerous, as you know.
It's not an exhaustive list. The comparison to the 2011 Obama thing is a total canard.
You can carve out anyone who helps the U.S. military abroad. Get special consideration. I don't think there's anybody who disagrees with that.
This is kind of my point, Tucker. If you start walking down the exception path, all right, so let's carve out all the interpreters who were... Okay, so what about the families of all the Iraqi military people who fought with us?
Well, I don't know. It kind of depends.
Well, sure, but okay, so let's carve out an exception for them. What about the Kurdish Peshmerga fighters in Syria?
But you're not asking for an exemption. You're trying to stop the whole thing.
The way this thing is written, right, and this is what happens when you send a couple of political guys into a telephone booth to write national security policy, and you don't talk to your director, your Secretary of Homeland Security, retired Marine general, who apparently you found out about this on television. What you get is an order that is so poorly written, so over-inclusive and under-conclusive at the same time, that we can talk about amending it, but you're trying to amend it.
That's not actually, with respect, you're being a little disingenuous, because that's not, I don't think you're making an unreasonable case here, but that's not the entirety of the case you are making or have been making. So last year, you wrote this piece, interesting piece, saying basically we have a moral obligation to bring in Syrian refugees.
I believe we do. I know you don't. I think that's completely
Well, it's not that I don't believe it. It's that no one has adequately explained to me where that moral obligation comes from and how it would help America. So I'm giving you the chance.
Yeah, sure. So, look, I mean, again, it helps America because, 1, we're in a fight, and 2, we're being asked to lead globally against ISIS, against Islamic extremists, right, who are, by the way, celebrating this ban openly, right? ISIS and the Taliban are thrilled about this. And I would encourage you to have some more security guys on the program.
I've talked to a million security guys, and your opinion is one among many, but the idea that ISIS is going to hate us and act against us now that Trump has issued these orders
they already
is
hate
ludicrous.
us. That's not what I'm saying. They already hate us. This is an aid to recruiting, right?
Well, they don't seem to have a problem with that already.
Yeah, they kind of do. I mean, if you got 15,000 Iraqis who've been willing to die to fight these guys, almost all of whom are Muslim, yeah, they have a recruiting problem.
Okay, so you think that they're going to dislike us more because of this. But what about our moral obligation? That's the part I don't understand.
Not just dislike us. They will get stronger and we will get weaker. I mean, when you tell the commander of Iraqi counterterrorism... No, it isn't. We just told the commander of Iraqi, General Al-Qatani, commander of Iraqi counterterrorism forces, his kids are living in the United States right now because they're under terrorist threat. He's in Iraq fighting. Under the CEO, according to General Petraeus, who knows what he's talking about, General Qatani is not allowed to come see his kids.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a dad for 90 days.
Okay, look.
But you're going to ask this guy to carry the fight against our biggest enemy and tell him, oh, for 90 days, don't come see your kids? I'm a dad. You're a dad. Come on, you wouldn't stand for that.
Yeah.
That's not hurt feelings. That's not like safe
governments
space
do
on
things
campus.
like this all the time.
No, they really don't.
But you're not answering. Again, this is why I'm accusing you of being disingenuous, because it doesn't answer the question. Why does the United States have a moral obligation to let people from Somalia come here? And I'm not against people from Somalia, but you haven't made an affirmative case for why that's good for our country. You're talking about Iraq and the families of the people who are fighting on our behalf. And I think that's a fine case. I don't know if I agree, but it's not stupid. But Somalia or Yemen.
Thank you so much.
No, I'm serious. Like, what? No, but like, this is about 7 countries. What about the others?
Let's do this. Somalia or Yemen. Look, we're facing the largest refugee crisis in the world since World War II. Our allies are under strain in Europe. Our allies are under strain in NATO. Our allies are strained around the world. America has a traditional role to step up and lead in a crisis like that. It's very hard to lead in a crisis when you say, you know what, we want everybody else to do the work. we're not going to pitch in here. I mean, you're undermining American moral leadership in this situation.
That's not true.
Of course
you can pitch in a countless number of ways without inviting the people to come live at your country in public expense.
We're talking about a tiny percentage of people, and by the way,
then how many?
There's a lot of stuff here that says, I mean,
how many
Syrian
refugees?
Taking what, 10,000 Syrian
but how many
refugees
should we take in? At what point will we have done our duty?
I mean, duty is a very loaded word here.
How many should we let in?
I mean, I would argue for a pretty large number of people. You would argue for fewer.
I don't know what I would argue. I'm asking you. You do it for a living. Well, how many refugees?
I mean, I think given the current vetting process and what it can take, you could do about 100,000 people, maybe 200,000
per year.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. But
and you would do that to help those countries or to help our? I mean, look. Here's the point. We could get virtually anyone in the world to come here who wanted to come. Why wouldn't you say, let's figure out the people who will help America?
I'm
Maybe
not
we
so
need
sure
some more
that's
software
true anymore. I mean, we can get the top talent in the world, except for anybody from these 7 countries.
Are you arguing that letting in 100,000 refugees from Syria or any of these countries would be to the economic benefit of the United States, to the moral benefit? Like, what is the point? That's all I'm asking. What is the point?
What's
exactly?
the point? You're taking in people who
so
are...
people you can feel good about yourself, or like,
no, it's not so I can feel good about myself.
Then why?
Of course not. No, in the face of the largest refugee crisis since the Second World War, the United States has a leadership role to play. And by the way, let's not talk about these people like they're total social burdens. I mean, Henry Kissinger came here as a refugee.
Are all social burdens.
Albert Einstein came here as a refugee.
Then
I mean,
if you're making, then are you? I just want to know what you're saying. Are you saying that if we let in 100,000 refugees per year, it will help the U.S. economy? It will assuage our guilt? I mean, like, what is the point? Okay, then what is it about?
It will ultimately, I think, help the U.S. economy. At very least, it's cost neutral. There's a lot of information out there.
You think it's cost neutral?
Yeah, I do in the long run think it's cost neutral.
How long will it take to become cost neutral?
I have absolutely no idea.
So it's a guess?
It's not a guess. It's an estimate. I mean, look, like, do you know?
No, but I have some sense of what the costs are, and they're high. They're high. I mean, so you have to give a kind of countervailing explanation for why we'd want to do this, and no one ever does, other than to say, well, you know, it's our role to lead in the world.
Oh, that's come on. That's a complete. You're building up a strong man and burning it down. You know that.
No, I'm actually not. I'm asking, and I really am asking a sincere question. I've asked it night after night. Why would we do this? Well, because we have an obligation to do this, because the Statute of Liberty tells us to do it.
I'm not sitting here moralizing about the Statute of Liberty. I think this is in our strategic interest. We are fighting extremists who are telling everybody in the Middle East, ISIS has a simple message. You have 2 choices, right? You, average Muslim person in the Middle East, have 2 choices. You can live under our rule and fight with us against America, or we'll kill you. And what I'm saying is the United States can offer a 3rd choice.
Which is come here?
Which is stand with the United States. And it sends a hell of a message to people.
And in exchange, you get to come here and go to our public schools?
Of course not. But to say none of you can come here, to say, and we're not just talking about refugees. I mean, you're making this a very narrow argument.
No, I'm not.
Refugees.
I'm actually talking about immigration.
We just banned immigration from 7 entire countries, 2 of whom are the front lines in this fight. We just told everybody who's standing with us, you know what? We'll let you go kill and die in Mosul. We'll give you the bullets to do it. We'll send our special forces guys to go back you up. By the way, there's some tough conversations happening between friends of mine who are embedded with Iraqi forces and the Iraqis they're working with right now.
Because their expectation was to move here after.
No, because, I mean, come on.
Oh, what do you mean? Come on, you just said that. So the tough conversations, I'm sorry, you don't get to move to the United States at the end?
Like, what's the tough conversation? No, it's why don't you trust us enough to say, why don't you believe that any of us could potentially come here or visit your country on a student visa or anything else? And oh, by the way, why are you helping ISIS? General Hertling, I'm serious. Get General Hertling, my old division commander in Iraq.
Don't take that. With respect, I just.
Phone calls.
I'm sure he is.
He's getting phone calls from Iraqi colonels and generals, and they're on the phone saying, "Why are you helping the enemy? We are fighting together." Have my buddy Matt Olson used to run the National Counterterrorism.
So I assume that if unfortunately I'm being told we're out of time, if this order though, if you're successful in your lawsuit, that ISIS recruiting will slow.
I think some damage has been done, but yeah, we can patch it up. I'm serious.
Okay.
I'm serious.
Mr. Green, thanks all for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll continue to follow tonight's breaking news throughout the hour. We'll have live updates on what the ruling means for travelers, the future of the travel ban, and more. Also, the administration placed new sanctions on Iran today and said more will be coming. One congressman who supports that approach is here tonight to explain why it's in our national interest exactly. Stay tuned. Well, the Trump administration says today's new sanctions on Iran are just the first wave of penalties if that country does not improve its behavior. This is a bad sign for the nuclear deal the Obama administration concluded with Iran 2 years ago, of course. But the question is President Trump putting the U.S. on the path to another showdown in that region? Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York supports the new sanctions on Iran, and he joins us now from Long Island, New York. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Happy to, Tucker.
So you have, I'm just trying to understand what that means. You have Michael Flynn and you have the president both saying essentially the same thing. This officially puts Iran on notice. That sounds to me like a big step toward conflict, a red line over which if crossed, we will fight. Is that what it is?
What I think it is for the United States and our relationship towards Iran is a necessary reposturing from a position of weakness to a position of strength. What we've seen under the past administration is that we were starting to treat Iran like Israel and Israel like Iran. America's foreign policy should be one where we're treating our friends as our friends and our adversaries as our adversaries, understanding that our adversaries don't respect weakness, they only respect strength. We can't be silent, not because we want war, but because we want to prevent it. And to kind of sum it all up, maybe another way for Iranian leadership is the party's over.
Okay, but what does that mean exactly? So that we're officially putting them on notice. How will we know when they've ignored the notice we're putting them on? And what does that mean? What's our next step?
Well, we have seen a couple of things over the course of the last few days. One was the statement that you referenced. Today, you're seeing 25 between individuals and entities having sanctions placed on them. There are additional options that are available for us to get leverage. What was the sanctions for today? Well, that was directed towards trying to slow down Iran's ballistic missile program, as well as resources that are going to the IRGC. Support from North Korea, China, Lebanon. There are a lot of entities connected to other countries, and these sanctions are making a step. Let it be known to those individuals and those entities, as well as whoever else can be next, like maybe Mahan Air, that we're going to take those actions. Now, big picture, the sanctions relief that we provided, the $150 billion as part of the JCPOA, right, or the upwards of $150 billion, we lost a lot of leverage. Iran is not at the table begging us for relief where we can negotiate what we need to with all of Iran's other bad activities. So this is just one step of what needs to be a multi-step process to get that leverage back on the table so that we can start talking about all of the other efforts to overthrow foreign governments, finance Assad in Syria and Hezbollah, their ballistic missile program, their efforts to, they're pledging to wipe Israel off the map and chanting death to America. There's a lot that needs to be addressed that wasn't part of the JCPOA.
Right, of course. I don't think anyone would defend Iran's behavior on a bunch of different fronts. But again, this seems like a line in the sand, and just for those of us following at home and with military-aged children, when exactly will we know if Iran has crossed it? If they conduct another missile test, will that be the spur to action, whatever the action is?
Well, it gives Iran a lot to think about, that there are consequences for their bad activities and that we will approach these conflicts from that position of strength. But the military option should be on the table. That doesn't mean that we want to use it, that we have to use it, but there's no reason to just unilaterally take that off the table because, quite frankly, we are the greatest nation in the world. We have the strongest military in the world. We have a much stronger economy here in the United States than Iran has over there. So as the leaders of the free world, understanding that there are other countries that follow our lead in the way we handle Iran, I think it's important for us to have all options on the table. As far as how that red line looks, I think it's a smart move on the part of the Trump administration to just reposture where we are from a position of weakness to strength. And over the course of the coming weeks, they were just sworn in, last couple weeks.
Well, sure. That's why that's why this was confusing. So, two questions really. Do you think the Iran missile program threatens the mainland United States? And what kind of support do you think the public would have for a war with Iran right now?
Well, there are some people who believe that the United States position as it relates to Iran's development of intercontinental ballistic missiles is because the United States is sticking up for Israel. These are intercontinental ballistic missiles. These aren't meant for Israel. It's meant for places like the United States. And every time that there's a ballistic missile test...
So you think they are a physical threat to the United States, the missile program in Iran?
They have made... on their holidays, they chant death to America in their streets.
Well, of course, they call... They don't like the United States, but are the missiles a threat, you think?
Yeah, they call... absolutely. Well, so aside from... they pledge to wipe Israel off the map, calling them the little Satan and America the great Satan. Every time they do one of these ballistic missile tests, it's an opportunity for them to make technical corrections and to improve their hardware. So these aren't just, it's not just a sign of aggression. It's much beyond that. This is them fine-tuning their weapon systems to be able to develop to be able to deliver warheads.
Okay, Congressman, thanks a lot. Lee Zeldin from
Thanks,
New York.
Tucker.
We appreciate it. Fox News alert: President Trump's executive order blocking arrivals from 7 Muslim nations has been halted across the country by a federal judge in the state of Washington. Fox News correspondent Trace Gallagher joins us now with the latest on that. Trace, what is this?
Tucker, the reason the case was in the court of federal judge James Robart is because the Washington State Attorney General filed a lawsuit against the president's executive order. And late today, when Judge Robart put a nationwide halt on enforcing the travel ban, he said it was because he believes the Washington State AG provided evidence that Mr. Trump's order would do immediate harm, target Muslims, and violate the constitutional rights of immigrants and their families. Washington Governor Jay Inslee tweeted, quote, "No person, not even the president, is above the law. We should feel heartened by today's victory and more resolute than ever that we are fighting on the right side of history." But in a response brief, attorneys for the Trump administration said Washington State lacked standing to bring the challenge and that the president has properly exercised his authority, saying, quote, "Every president over the last 30 years has invoked this authority to suspend or impose restrictions on the entry of certain aliens or certain classes of aliens, in some instances including classifications based on nationality. We have not yet heard from the White House, but legal experts say they expect the Trump administration to both abide by the judge's ruling and seek an emergency appeal of the ruling." The administration also, by the way, scored a victory today when a Boston judge refused to extend a restraining order that blocked the president's temporary travel ban. That judge was skeptical of claims that the president's order represented religious discrimination. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thanks for that. Well, tonight's court ruling means that, at least for now, the president's executive order on immigration will not be enforced. Does that pose a threat to Americans? Tammy Bruce says the order was a boost to the country's long-term safety, and she joins us now from New York City.
Hey,
Tammy, great to see you. So why do you think the president's executive orders kept the country safer?
Well, look, obviously there's a reason for the order in those nations. It was failed nation states and then 2 nation states that are state sponsors of terror, Sudan and Iran. These are nations, as a result, all 7 of them, where there's no real infrastructural way to tell who it is that we're allowing in the country, first of all. And then you've got, of course, these are the nations that are consumed with civil war, with terrorism, where terrorist groups have the majority of the landmass. In addition, that ISIS, through the 3 cities that it's taken, Mosul and Raqqa and other areas in Libya, have what's called a fake passport industry. They have tens of thousands of blank passports in addition to state-based machinery to make identification papers. So you have potentially thousands of individuals with fake materials, fake ID. Remember also, Iran, like North Korea, has a state-sanctioned counterfeiting operation, not just with American cash, which is why we keep changing the design of our money, but also for identity papers. So we're looking at a dynamic where, until we can be absolutely sure about who's coming into this country, we have to presume that there's a problem. Remember, this is limited. This was about making sure that we had some mechanism. So obviously, this is the hot spot of where there's effectively a regional war leading to a world war, and we've got to have some parameters at this point.
So, I mean, how confident are you that the federal government, under this president or any other, knows who's coming in? There was this weird moment today where DHS said that these orders affect 100,000 visa holders, followed pretty swiftly by the State Department moving the number down to 60,000. Wow. What do you make of that?
Look, whether it's 60 or 100,000, I thought that news was great news in that, my goodness, we have potentially 100,000 people from a region that we don't even know who's there, that we've given visas to. I mean, that was a sign that this order was working, because it had been almost like we had been handing them out like candy. So there's no way that you could have 60 to 100,000 visas. Remember, this is just for those 7 countries. It's not like worldwide. And of course, now at this point, those visas are technically canceled. But if people still have the piece of paper, and now with this order being temporarily stopped, people can still come in. We had a number of Iranians fly in through Boston for a period of time
Right.
who were allowed into the country with visas that effectively had been canceled.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what about the argument that's being made by a lot of people that this is in effect a religious test, a Muslim ban, and is therefore unconstitutional?
Look, what's interesting is here's what the left is doing. They are determined to make sure that the Barack Obama theory, that the liberal theory of open borders, that everyone can come in here because that's what they need to do to boost their power, is the only answer. They've got to make sure that Trump fails, and as a result that this nation fails, because otherwise they'll be proven to be frauds. This obviously is not a religious test. It's 7 nations. 85% of the Muslims on the planet are not affected. So on its face, that's specious. I believe all of these, all the litigation, all the lawsuits will ultimately fail. But this is a test for the Trump administration because this is about keeping our nation safe. We've sent the USS Cole over to Yemen. I mean, we're in a world where we're almost preparing for war here. And so keeping the parameters around this country is key. These arguments from the left are frauds. And of course, they're meant to just to have Trump fail, which means they want the nation to fail.
Tammy Bruce, thanks for that.
Thanks.
Well, we have the governor of the state of Washington, Jay Inslee, on the phone. Governor Inslee backed the lawsuit that just brought down the president's order. Governor, are you there?
I am.
Thanks for joining us. So what was the basis of the lawsuit?
Well, tonight, a federal judge appointed by President George W. Bush found, in effect, that there is a high probability of ultimate success, that this is an illegal and an unconstitutional executive order. The claims that essentially the judge found would have a likelihood of success were, number one, that this is a clearly religiously intolerant decision, and contrary to your last speaker, who apparently hasn't read the order, the order very specifically says that one particular religion, which is Muslims, are supposed to go to the back of the bus and the end of the line on the line that is formed nationwide to use the limited number of refugee spots that are allowed into this country. And this is absolutely forbidden by any fundamental notions of who we are as Americans or the U.S. Constitution, because we have never, ever, under any president, Republican or Democrat, proposed some test of religion to enter this country. That's simply verboten. It's wrong. It will not stand. And I'm proud that we had a federal judge from Seattle who stood up to this chaotic order that President Trump made. Now, second, there was a second ground of this. This essentially was not reasonable. And it wasn't reasonable under the Due Process Clause, because look what happened. One of the things the judge asked, he asked the federal government today, he said, could you give me the information of how many Muslim refugees from these 7 countries who have caused a fatal terrorist attack since September 11th, of the 700,000 people who have been admitted? Well, he already knew the answer. It was 0. So this was a violation, in my view. I haven't seen the order of the court yet, of some fundamental notions of common sense, which means due process in a sense.
Well,
so
due process and common sense are not the same thing, of course. But I have read the orders, and I don't remember the part where it says Muslims have to get to the back of the bus. And of course, these orders don't cover the majority of the world's Muslims. So how is it a Muslim ban exactly?
Well, what it says is it's a disguised effect. But what the order says is that religious minorities will have priority in acceptance of the refugees. And in these 7 countries, we know who the religious majority is, and we know who the religious minority is. The majority of the Muslims, and they were given a subordinate position in the priority for these highly sought after refugee status. Now we understand we have a very limited number of refugee spots, and they are given the spots to non-Muslims ahead of Muslims. That's clearly the religious test. And by the way, I heard your previous saying this is a bunch of whiny liberals. Look, this was a federal judge tonight appointed by President George W. Bush.
Oh, come on, Governor. That's. I mean, you didn't hear me say that for one thing. It's not just whiny liberals, but this judge is liberal, and you know it. So let's not pretend otherwise. But here's the point.
Apparently, George Bush thought he was okay when he appointed him.
Well, he appointed plenty of liberals, by the way, for whatever it's worth. But here's the point. There is actually lots of precedent for moving religious minorities and persecuted people to the front of the line in our admittance process. That goes back hundreds of years, and you know it. So to say that this has never happened, of course it has. Look, I'm not saying that there aren't problems the way this has been administered, and there may be philosophical problems with it in the first place, but isn't it demagogic of you to pretend something that's not true, which is that this bans Muslims or puts them to the back of the line? It's just not true. We've had plenty of administrations say, this is a persecuted group, let's bring them here first. You've seen it before.
So I think what is unique in this situation, we've never had a president of the United States who ran for this exalted office. Instead, it was his clear intent to ban all Muslims, who made a very profound that from henceforth, I, Donald Trump, will make sure Muslims don't come into this country. Then goes to Rudy Giuliani and says, is there a way I can do this to keep Muslims out? And they designed this executive order. And by the way, the one thing you and I can agree on is this was the worst planned, worst executed thing. They couldn't run a two-car funeral of the people who ran this thing.
Okay,
well, we deserve better on this.
You're arguing a bunch of different things. I mean, simply because of the Obamacare rollout was chaotic doesn't mean you don't support Obamacare. I would never claim that the rollout of this was not chaotic. It was chaotic, and it was embarrassing. But it doesn't. You're claiming something different. You're saying this is a ban on Muslims when you know that it isn't. And so it seems to me when you say things like that, you increase the level of fear and misinformation, don't you?
What I'm saying is that this executive order contains an unconstitutional test of what religion is affected and how they are affected, and it differentiates in a clear intent by this president to not treat this part of the world with respect. And I think it damages our national security. And Tucker, I'm really sorry. I've got about 200 people waiting for me here, and I've got to excuse myself.
Well,
but I appreciate you having me on very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Well, breaking tonight, a federal judge in Seattle has blocked Trump's travel ban nationwide, as we just said. Joining us now is Michael Wilds. He's an immigration attorney who, as it happens, last worked for First Lady Melania Trump when she came to this country. He's also a critic of the president's order. Mr. Wilds, thanks a lot for joining us.
My pleasure. Just to clarify, I helped Mrs. Trump during the campaign clarify her immigration status. I've represented the Trump organization for over a decade, the Trump models, the Miss Universe, when Mr. Trump owned it as well. But I'm here to talk about the order that happened less than an hour ago.
So, I mean, there are many ways to criticize this and to support it. And I guess the one that annoys me the most, because I think it's the least true, is the claim that this is specifically legally excluding Muslims. The order, as you know, since you've read it, says that we give priority to the victims of religious persecution, to religious minorities. We did that for decades during the Cold War with Jewish refuseniks in the Soviet Union. And we said, look, you're persecuted, and they sure were, and we're going to put you to the front of the line in coming to the United States. We've done this a lot of different times. Why is this different? Christians really are being singled out for persecution in those regions.
A few statutory reasons, a few constitutional predicates. First, statutory. The 1952 Walter McCarran Act, the Immigration Act, allowed the president to suspend immigration in the event of emergency, but in 1965, it clarified that a president and Congress cannot actually discriminate based on national origin. There's a statutory argument. The constitutional argument, well, we believe, or historically, equal protection doesn't allow itself to our shores until it hits our shores. In other words, there's no entitlement to have a visa. There's no entitlement to constitutional protection until you come to the United States. I disagree with it, but that's the stated law. The truth be told, there is a state's right, which was supported just now in the temporary restraining order by a federal judge in that jurisdiction, that recognizes Amazon has an Iraqi employee. The local school have foreign students. There are a lot of people that are impacted, and there's a federal or fundamental right for individuals to travel, and that was impeded. The Trump lawyers just relied on, I think, the most egregious of our national history, the Chinese Exclusion Acts and the internment of the Japanese. We have to get past this chapter. I believe in my heart, Tucker, that this president...
You've thrown a lot of things out here.
I believe in my heart the president is a patriot and is trying to make us safe. But if you're going to selectively choose 7 countries and you're going to stop people midstream, green card holders, I have titans of industry right now stuck in third country nations because they can't get back because they were born in Iran. And they're American permanent residents.
And I have no doubt that that's true, and it must be deeply frustrating, and green card holders are now apparently exempted, as you know.
But it wasn't a week ago.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I would never defend that. That was silly, but it's apparently been fixed. But let's just get back to something you said a second ago.
Sure.
You don't think that due process, as guaranteed under the Constitution, should be just restricted to American citizens, or you think that citizens of foreign countries ought to be able to sue the United States because they're barred entry or because they don't get services from the U.S. government? Like, what is that?
This is your show, and I am honored to come back another time and debate that. I'm here to opine on the decision. The decision said that the states had an issue.
Okay, historically, look, that's central to this.
Let me answer your concern. Lawyers do not have, you have no right to counsel at the airport, even though you've made an admission into the United States physically with your feet on the ground. You go to secondary inspection, there's no right to a lawyer at the border. You don't have constitutional protections generally. But there is a right, and the state has asserted, and the federal judge believes in this instance that they're going to sustain an argument in the long term. And by the way, Tucker, and for everyone watching this is going to be like DACA. This injunction is going to stay while it goes to the Supreme Court, and it's going to take months to kind of work this out. And I hope the president and Congress come up with another alternative. But we see how impactful immigration is on our commerce, and the fact that states are setting up, Marbury versus Madison, supremacy clause, all the wonderful things we teach students in law school, that this is a federal matter. You know what? Immigration has a great impact. It's not only an entrepreneurial and an engine for our economy, but people care about it now. From our first lady,
you've said so many things that it's hard for me to pin down anyone, but I just want to get back to the core question, which is, do the residents of foreign countries, non-U.S. citizens, have a legal or moral claim on coming here? Or is that entirely up to the discretion of the U.S. government and its citizens? And I think most people would imagine the second is true. You're arguing that the former is true. And I think that's not a mainstream position.
There is no entitlement to come to America. The statute itself has a presumption that everybody wants to live here, and it's your burden when you come to our shores to prove that you're actually going to leave. However, once a person is given a visa, once they have ties that are very strong in the United States, and once they have been accorded a visa and they have other equities that have developed here, it's a different game. And you want to know something? It's 2017, Tucker.
Okay, I know the year, but doesn't that cast us as kind of passive, us being Americans, as passive participants in this process? Shouldn't we be able to say, and why don't we assert the right to say, we want these people in our country. We think they're going to help our country. They'll succeed here. We don't want these people. We don't think they will. Why is that an immoral desire? Most other countries around the world run their immigration that way.
Here. The plenary power of making laws is vested with Congress, not with our president, who's now going to experiment in a way to keep us safe. Uber vetting of just 7 countries when Indonesia and Saudi Arabia, 16 of the 19 hijackers hailed from Saudi Arabia. 11 million plus people here unlawfully, and we're going to beat up on 7 people with the prayer that the rest of the Muslim world will not come in?
Should we add Saudi Arabia to the list? I mean, what is your point?
I don't think it was a comprehensively thought or executed plan, and it certainly wasn't constitutional.
But since you and I get to comment on it after the fact, do you think we should add Saudi Arabia and, as you said, Indonesia to the list? Like, what are you saying? Or should we just assume that all countries and their citizens pose an equal threat to us? Do you think that is true?
I think
are the citizens of Finland as much a threat to us as the citizens of Saudi Arabia? Like, can we draw those distinctions, or are we not allowed to?
We shouldn't be drawing distinctions with Lady Liberty, but a few miles from this studio that I'm sitting in, with a beacon to those tired and huddled masses. We should not be stopping to take people in.
Again. I love the poem.
Let me say, we fought pirates and we took in refugees in the 1700s. ISIS can be put down without losing our national character and vibrance of immigration.
But that's not a serious point. I mean, I love immigrants. Actually, I mean it, and we're all the grandchildren of them. But I mean, like, we should be able. It's up to us, right? Not to the Statue of Liberty.
It's up to us to get this right, to be safe, and to go forward and not discriminate.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
This story is continuing to break, and of course, we'll continue to cover it as it does. Up next, Stuart Taylor, the famed writer, will join us to talk about sexual assault on campuses. How big a problem is it? And is due process afforded on campus? Justice in academia ahead. Well, to hear the Obama administration tell it, the typical American college is like war-ravaged Syria, but with a library. Sexual assault, we were told, afflicts 1 in 5 or maybe even 1 in 4 women on a typical campus. And a wave of executive orders and new programs were meant to fix it. But was there hype involved in those estimates, and were the people accused given due process? Stuart Taylor is a journalist and the co-author of a new book called The Campus Rape Frenzy, The Attack on Due Process at America's Universities, and he joins us now. Stuart, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being with me.
I have no doubt, obviously, sexual assault occurs on campus, and it's horrifying.
Exactly.
But at what rate is the question, and at what rate are people falsely accused? What's the truth of that? You just wrote a book on that question.
That's right. And sure, yeah, rape's terrible, and it happens on campus, stipulated. The idea that 1 in 5 college women are raped or sexually assaulted more broadly while on campus is absolute nonsense. It comes from surveys by private organizations that have agendas, that ask misleading questions. They don't ask the women, were you raped or sexually assaulted, because they know they won't get anywhere near the numbers they want. There are pretty good federal surveys on this. They would suggest that 1 in 100, roughly, women are raped during their 4 years in college, 5 years. And if you add lesser sexual assaults, less serious ones, you're up to about 1 in 40 or 1 in 50. That's way too many. But it's not the escalating national crisis that the Obama administration pretended it was.
Now, in tandem with those claims was the idea that basically everyone accused of a sexual misdeed on campus was guilty. And my question from the beginning was, well, what happens to those people? Are they able to prove that they're not guilty, if indeed they're not guilty? Or is the justice system on campus anything like you'd expect in normal life?
No, it's not at all. It's a Kafkaesque campus kangaroo courts is my word for them. First, lots of people accused of rape or sexual assault on and off campus are not guilty, especially on campus, because there are squadrons of sex bureaucrats at all the colleges in the country who are encouraging women to say they were raped when what they really were was regretful afterwards. So no, it's not 1 in 5. And the kangaroo courts, the guys are almost presumed guilty, not innocent. They're not allowed to cross-examine their accusers. They're not allowed to see the evidence against them. They're put before impartial, partial panels of feminist ideologues a lot of time. The whole thing is outrageously unfair, and the result is that a number of people, there are about 100 plus who have sued, and there are a lot of those cases that we've seen, and a lot of young men who are almost certainly innocent, or probably innocent, you never know for sure, are being railroaded out of college based on bogus charges.
See, what I've never understood is rape is one of the most serious of any possible crimes. Horrifying. So why would a campus be adjudicating that? Why wouldn't the police, who have a lot of experience with this, be in charge, and the courts be in charge of determining what happened?
It should be left to the police. The history is, decades ago, the police were not very nice to real victims of rape.
Yes.
They didn't take it seriously. I went to police districts. I heard them laughing about it. And so police got a bad rap.
Yeah.
And over time, they've gotten a whole lot better and more professional in handling these cases. But the feminist ideologues, the extreme feminist ideologues, man-hating ideologues, a lot of them, don't get that. So they developed this movement. Well, the police won't presume the guilt of the guys, and the campuses will, so let's have the campuses do it. And then the Obama administration ratcheted that up on April 4th, 2011 by essentially ordering all of the 7,000 plus campuses in the country that receive federal money to institute 5 specified new procedures, all of them designed to increase the probability of guilt, with an overhang of threatening to bring bad publicity and maybe take the money away, federal money, from any college that didn't do exactly what the Obama administration ordered it to do. But as a result, even the ones who might like to be fair are not fair.
It doesn't make sense, though. If you sincerely thought someone committed sexual assault, I want that person in jail.
Exactly, and it's so twisted that the Obama administration and the colleges really discourage young women who say they were raped from going to the police. Sometimes they go to the police, but the colleges tend to say, and the Obama said, don't trust the police, they won't be nice to you, come to us. And one thing that's blindingly clear about that is it's not making the campuses any safer. If you really believe that there's an epidemic of rape on campus, you want to put those guys in prison.
Yes.
The college process can't put them in prison. And unless you take them to the cops, which usually the colleges discourage, they'll just go on. If they're real rapists, they'll go on to the next place and keep raping.
It's bewildering. I want people who commit sexual assault in jail. I mean,
I do too.
That's simple. All right. Stuart Taylor, interesting book, Campus Rape Frenzy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure being with you.
We'll be right back. That's it for us on this busy night of breaking news. Every night is. This week, a federal judge blocked President Trump's travel ban, at least temporarily. Customs and Border Protection has instructed U.S. airlines they can now board travelers who've been affected by that travel ban. How will the president respond? And he will. We'll bring it to you when we know. In the meantime, good night. Have a great weekend. And be sure to tune into Sean Hannity, which follows this. Good night.